Hello and welcome to A Wealthy Life. My name's Vicky Washay, and in this week's episode, I'm speaking to the incredible Hanif Khan, a man I have known throughout my entire property career. He's been a veteran of this journey for a good 27 years. And you can imagine the opportunity to speak to somebody who has spent 20 years not only investing in property, but actually creating businesses that have enabled him to live a life of his choosing, a wealthy life. This is a really information-packed, thoughtful and inspiring podcast. So strap yourself in. This is definitely one you're going to have to listen to twice. Hello, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I'm with a wonderful guest today, Hanif Khan. I have known Hanif almost since the start of my journey into property. I think I would have met him around about 2008 when we all used to go to quite a famous property event at the time, the Berkshire Property Meet that was held in Maidenhead. Doesn't exist anymore, so you can't go. You've missed it. And what I really wanted to do is get Hanif on because he has been investing since 1997. I joked with him, especially with the whole silver beard going on. He's like my granddaddy of property investing. Not the oldest, because he's actually remarkably young, but certainly the person who has been investing the longest that I have spoken to so far. So you're the winner, Hanif. Welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for inviting me along, and I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, really good. And it's been great to actually catch up with you again over the last 12 months, because obviously we all stopped going to some of the bigger networking meetings or whatever and have missed one another. So it's been lovely to reconnect. So I really wanted to see how much of your brain I could squeeze out for the listeners. And at the end of this, sort of through the journey that we're going to discuss, see if you can then come up with 3 pieces of advice that you would then give the listeners so that they can then start their journey or improve their journey the best way possible. Because where we've been investing for a long while, what you and I did back in the day, I mean, you obviously long before me, but you know, I started in 2008, and what I did in 2008, you can't do now. And what you probably started off with in 1997, you can't do now. But it's still interesting to look at what you did, because in what you did gives a clue to what you were thinking and how you either found an opportunity or got over a challenge. So you said you bought the first deal at 27. You were 27. What was that first deal, and how did that come about? What made you suddenly decide to invest in property?
So I had a job in IT, and my dad goes, buy a house. And I was like, can't be asked, I'm working in London. And he goes, buy a house in Birmingham. It's a good investment. So in the end, I went, okay, fine, just to sort of get him off my back. And I looked for some houses. I didn't want to pay full price for a house. So I looked around, went to a few estate agents and found a property that was being repossessed. So I got a repossession, got it actually, I put an offer in and they turned my offer down and said they sold it to someone else. And then about 4 weeks later, they rang me and said, that offer's fallen through. Is your offer still valid? And at the time I bought this house, I think for 33,000. And I stupidly said yes. What I should have said was, oh, I'll knock it down a little bit, because obviously they're chasing me now, but I didn't know that at the time. So I just said yes. So I then ended up buying this property, and it was a 4-bedroom house in Birmingham. Obviously it's been a long time. You can't get anything for 33 grand anymore.
Couldn't get a bedroom for that.
No, exactly. So that was my very first property. And then I noticed it went up in value. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And over the sort of the next year, it went up by like 15 grand or something, or a year and a half. And I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Maybe I should do a bit more of this. But I didn't really do anything else then until sort of when I was 30. That's when I really sort of took off and started doing property. And it was really because I had a why. So it was in the back of my mind for years and years, but I never really did anything until my daughter was about to be born, and I was like, okay, I'm going to want to spend a lot of time with her. I don't want to go to a 9 to 5 job. What should I do in order to give me more free time to be able to have flexibility? So I remember looking at lots of different types of businesses, everything from pound shops to, importing things from China to all sorts. And then one day I was reading, I think, I can't remember the Times Rich list.
Mm.
And in there, I noticed everyone who was there was, IT and property, a business and property, and they all sort of
Yeah.
had this property thing. And I thought, okay, look, I've made some, I know about property, or I've done one deal, and let me investigate. So then I really got my head in, understood more about property. It fitted all the criteria I wanted because it gave me full flexibility in terms of when I worked. And I could see that there was a lot of stuff that was being done in the US in terms of creative deals that people in the UK just didn't do. So that was really, I thought I had an angle, and I thought I could do it in a different way. And that's basically what I started doing. I didn't have money at the time. So I, left my job. And well, first I went to a 4-day week. Then I took a sabbatical, and then I never went back,
Yeah.
basically. And it's very difficult to actually leave your job. And it took me like a year from when I wanted to actually do it. So I was thinking about it. We were going to have a baby, and because we decided we wanted a baby, and I thought, when the baby arrives, I don't want to be working. So it took me a whole year to get to this point, and timed it quite well. She was just born when I finally left, and it gave me amazing flexibility. And you were asking, what was the strategy I used at the time? So I used two strategies really when I first started. One was BRR, so buy, refurbish, and refinance, and then the second was just to flip them and take the money and move on to the next deal.
Mm.
And I looked at a lot of trend history on property. I'm kind of geeky like this and do a lot of geeky stuff. So I looked at prices. When did they rise the most in a year? What months do they go up and stuff like that? And I realized that if you buy properties sort of, or if you make offers in November, December, in January, February, you get usually house prices go up quite significantly because a lot of people are coming in to buy at that point. So, and if you've made your offers in November, December, because people have had their property on maybe since August and haven't had any offers, they'll accept lower offers.
Yeah.
So if you can make a lower offer there, wait for the increase in February and flip it out quickly with the new higher price. And so I decided that was going to be my strategy, and I made offers on 10 properties and then left my job. And I ended up buying about 8 of those properties or flipping them on. 2 of them fell out of bed for various reasons, but about 8 of them I ended up buying. And then I just carried on buying more properties, fixing them, and followed that momentum
Oh,
going
brilliant.
forward. And it worked really well. And
So,
it
so
gave me
there's
the flexibility.
Yeah, so that there's three things there. One, it actually was about time. I mean, I had a similar thing to you with young children. So I started off as a university lecturer because the one thing about that is that I would get the school holidays off because university was shut when my kids were going to be out. But I knew that when that job didn't work for me, I needed something that still gave me the same sort of thing, that time flexibility. And I think that we are all put down this funnel which is about we have to go to work because we have to earn money, but actually what makes us all miserable is that we don't have the time. So finding that way to bring that in, so that's really interesting. The thing about flipping is you wouldn't have been tied in mortgages with early redemption penalties and all that sort of stuff back in the day, would you? So if you
No.
took out a loan, then it was much easier to do. Of course, now that's a lot harder. But the real thing that struck me here, and yes, you're geeky, but we're talking about a time before the internet here, or the very early days. I remember when you were buying houses, I was just doing my first degree at uni, and I was still using the dot prompt and not WordPress, Word Perfect, all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
there wasn't the sort of Google that we've got now. How did you how did you find out about the fact that they were even doing this sort of stuff in America? You couldn't like type
Yeah.
it into Google.
Yeah, there was a little bit of internet around, and you could find some stuff, but really it was getting books that had been written for the US market. So I
Right.
think there was one that I remember reading called No Money Down. Can't remember who wrote it, but that was like a classic US creative strategy book, which I got and read. But there was lots of actual books that I'd buy off of. There were a few websites. I mean, Amazon wasn't really around at the beginning, but there was, I think it was called ABE Books or something, which was the biggest bookshop at the time. And Amazon was around as well, but they didn't have older books or different books. And I I used to get my information from there, and a lot of the statistical stuff came from the library. You know, you'd go into the library and they'd have this computer that had some database on the back of it, and you'd type it in and get the information you needed from them.
Sounds so prehistoric, doesn't it? It's
I
like
know
going
it
to
does.
those,
When you mentioned it, I just realised. Can you imagine how much effort it is? And now
oh,
all you need to
it's
do
here.
is 2 seconds, and you can Google
Yeah,
anything you
I
want.
mean, never mind here on your screen. I mean, it's here in your
Yeah,
hand, isn't it? I
I
mean,
know.
people, I don't think, I know, I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, and it's going to, but you don't know, listeners, you don't know how easy you've got it if you're doing it. I mean, when we wanted to make a phone call, all right, maybe some people have mobile phones, but there were still these red boxes that you had to
Yeah,
walk into and use a real thing called money, and you put this coin in, and then you could ring someone. So there was all of this stuff going
right.
on. And the fact that you learned from books, is quite hysterical. I mean, obviously, I've written a lot of books, but I think now everybody's into the visual, if it's not short, if it's not a video, if it's not funny, if it's not on Instagram or TikTok, then that's where everybody's getting their knowledge from. And it's quite a bit different learning from a book. There are thousands of words in a book,
Yep.
pages that you have to turn, and you can't digitally search. You might have an index at the beginning so you can maybe jump to chapters, but you've literally got to read all of this stuff. And I wonder if that gave you a different, deeper level of understanding than if you'd started now, if you can imagine now, just, like learning off of Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for sure. What I see a lot of people is, somebody tells them about strategy, they spend 5 minutes and they think they know it. So I read books quite differently to what I've noticed other people do. I didn't realize this until I spoke to people, but the way I've always read, when I read books, I underline and I then make notes around that thing about how I'm actually going to implement what I've just read in that book. So, if they've talked about something, I then will make a note, say, how does this implement on what I do in my current businesses, in my life, in whatever I'm going to do? And that really kind of holistically fills that knowledge into my brain.
Yeah.
Um,
You're
whereas most people,
interacting with the
correct,
knowledge at the
yes,
time, and because you're reading the words at your pace, you're then going, oh, in a sense, press pause at the end of that chapter or sentence or paragraph, and you're going, right, wow, okay, I can apply this. And so you're immediately applying. I did the same thing, highlighter pens, and then writing. I hate doing this to a book, but it's the better way of doing it. And then I like it when they've given you white space. I know everybody crams all the words in, but I
yeah,
like white space. So sometimes you've got to like write sideways all the way down the side of the
yeah,
page to
I,
to fit
I, I
in your
do.
notes.
Yeah, it's exactly what I do. And it really, I'll look at the different businesses that we have or different things that I have, and I'll say, okay, how can I implement that in this? How can I implement that in that? How can I implement that? And that really makes you understand that knowledge and remember it long
Mm.
term. Whereas most people will read stuff superficially, think, oh, that's really great quote, that's really good thing, but not really think about how they're going to apply that to stuff. So it's just,
How it's
it's just
relevant to them.
yeah, it's never really absorbed in the same way. But
Mm.
yeah, so yeah, it is different. I mean, I've got quite a few kids and they learn completely differently. They do learn from shorts and this and that, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily any different. I mean, I'll ask them a question and they'll come back and they'll have a very deep understanding of it because they've looked at it from 4 or 5 different aspects
Yes.
using Google really
Yeah,
quickly.
because then they'll go off and pick around at the back of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so long as you do that, I don't think it matters whether I mean, I love books and I'll read books, and I've probably got 1,000 books at home easily, if not more. But having that information through Google or whatever there's nothing wrong with it, or videos or YouTube. And I think, it's a combination of everything that makes you successful and able to use that. But the the number one thing is think about that information, how you're going to apply it in your life in
Yeah.
some way.
It's very definitely the application. I think it's fact checking and the
Yes.
application. So not fact checking as in anybody who's putting anything out on social media. I mean, I do, you do. It's not that we're lying, but it's actually digging deeper into the topic. So effectively what we would have done in books, which is get another book or read another chapter. So it's deepening that, not just take the face value, deepen the knowledge, and then look at how you apply it to yourself. I think that's a really great takeaway here. So let's jump forward to 10 years. So here we started off in 1997. You bought your first house. There was a bit of a gap. Started with a family, and then you got into it, and you learned that by books and seeing what they were doing in America. Now we're at about the time we met, so sort of 2008. And at this point, I guess you're still doing the buying your houses, but now you started to teach what you've learned to others. Would that be fair as a summary of that period then?
Yeah, so probably around 2005, I think I started teaching, 2006 maybe. So before the crash. And it was really accidental. Somebody came to me. I don't know if you remember Palm
Yes, I
Deep
do.
Edition.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, you're doing some really cool stuff. Why don't you teach other people that?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Oh, let me run this event, and you can teach people some of these creative strategies that you do." So I did, and I found it really good fun and enjoyed it. So then I ended up doing a lot more and just teaching people some of the creative strategies that I'd learned from the US and twisted, because they didn't quite work in the UK,
Yeah.
because our legal system is different, and the way we buy is different. So I had to twist them to make them work in the UK. But we got them legal and working and checked with lawyers and so on. And then I just used them to buy my own properties, and then I started teaching that to other people, and we did that for quite some time.
I remember those. I mean, apart from you coming up and speaking events, I remember going to one where I think I sat at the back of the room and I wrote my very first book. So in probably 2009, because it came out in 2010, the very first version of Using Other People's Money, How to Invest in Property. Simon Zushti had said to me that I needed to outsource more and sent me the challenge of writing a book. So I started doing that, and then you were doing the course, and they were great courses full of knowledge, but they were a lot of fun as well. So there was a
Yeah,
whole group of you up the front of the room, like the Five Musketeers or whatever you were,
yeah, yeah.
and you and Palm Deep. And then later on, when was it that we drove over to Monte Carlo? Remember
Yeah,
that?
so we used to like to do fun stuff. So I remember we did some kind of race to Monte Carlo, didn't
We
we?
did. It was
Um,
it was supposed to be a networking opportunity, but actually you gave everybody this big talk right at the beginning. I think we meant it in something like Blue Water or something over near
yes,
Dover
cool.
or Kent. And you said, right, so what we're going to do is we're going to set off, and then this is the first place we're going to meet, and then we're going to meet there. And literally we got on and we just had to get on I think we were on a ferry. Did we do it? We
We
couldn't have
went
done
on
a
a
ferry.
ferry, and then from the ferry we drove through France.
Yeah, but what I'd like to say is as soon as some people, and I won't mention names, hit French territory, their foot hit the accelerator and we never saw them again.
Yeah, I know, and I remember certain people who quite well known blew the car up
They
within
did blow the
within
car up, didn't they?
within an hour. They blew their Aston Martin up. But yeah, it was interesting. It was really good fun, and I used to love doing all those kind of things. And
Yeah,
we then spent, I think it was a weekend in Monte Carlo, all of
yeah.
us, and went out to the hotels and the casinos and whatever. And it was great. And
And it was
we
educational because we had a property
yes,
training in the middle there, so it was all
yeah,
claimable
yeah.
on expenses.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and it was great fun, and I really enjoyed doing that sort of stuff, and did it for a while. But yeah,
And then it sort of drizzled off a bit. So you've got the training, you've got all the stuff that you're doing in the background. And I know now that, well, I know you've still got some training that you do, but you've also got a big care home business. So I'd like to know how you made that transition, and then also the next phase that we'll talk about, which is where you're helping businesses to scale. So let's do how did you go from what you were doing to either identifying or deciding to get into care homes then?
Okay, so I like to learn and stuff. So I decided I wanted to do an MBA, and I did an MBA, and on that MBA I met Trudy, who's my partner in the care home business, and she was working for a care company at the time, and she was working really hard, like doing like 80 hours, 90 hours a week or something, plus the MBA. And I was like, why don't you just do your own? And she was like, oh, I don't know. So anyway, in the end, I introduced her to someone that I knew in the care world, and said, you guys should partner up. She's got all the knowledge, and she can help you expand and scale. So they got together, but then she was like, I don't want to work with him. It's not right. Can you do it with me now? And I was like, oh, what do I know about care homes? And she's like, look, you get me the properties, I'll do the care side of stuff. So I was like, okay, fine. And that was basically our relationship. And I got the properties, and she ran the care business, and it's grown over the years. Now we have 130 people working for us in that business, roughly. And it's a great business that's doing really well.
So there's a couple of things here about what makes it a great business. So from a property perspective, you've got the asset and you've
Right.
leveraged the asset, but now you're not renting it to a tenant where you're getting the cash flow. It's effectively commercial. And so you're putting a business in. It just so happens that you own that business that you're putting in. So now you've got a business that makes money, and it also, out of its expenses, pays you property. So you're sort of getting a double hit out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, the underlying plan was, how can I build a portfolio of property long term from this business? And by owning the properties and then renting them to our company, it pays it pays off the mortgages and the loans against those properties. They're not it's a commercial loan rather than a mortgage.
Yeah.
But it means we will outright own all of those properties over either a 7 or 10 year period, depending on the loan that we've done against each property, and allows us to have a very nice nest egg at the other end,
Yeah.
whilst making profit along the way. And so, even if tomorrow we stopped running the business, or the market changed and you couldn't run it anymore profitably, we still own all of those properties. And that for me was crucial. It's building the assets off the back of the businesses that you run and do.
Yeah. Yeah. And really interesting that your profitable business is paying off your asset. So then you own your asset outright, which is great to have, but you've still got that profit. But also you've managed to pick a market where we're guaranteed to keep going, because people are always going to get older.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of security in that business. It's pretty much the same. There's not been much disruption. People get old, they have to be looked after. And the next disruption is going to be when we've got robots that can look after people, and AI interlinked, and that's going to be when this kind of stuff stops working in the same way. But we're years and years and years away from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And by disruption, you mean probably government interference, if I'm reading that a bit right.
Yeah, kind of like government interference, but more so about disruptive technology. So
Yeah.
lots of businesses at the moment have had a lot of disruptive technology. Their whole business models have had to change,
Yes.
because the internet changed a lot of shops, for example, but the internet had almost zero effect on how you look after old people, as
Yes.
an example.
Yeah. So
But
things like massages, cutting hair, etc.
yes,
Until we've got robots that can take over those jobs.
correct,
Your care home is a people business.
correct.
Bro. So then what year was the first, just so I can keep doing my chronology, what year was the first care home roughly?
So we've actually owned the care home business for 14 years now. So we've had it for
Okay,
14
so
years.
we're at 2010. So
Yeah.
just again, round about the time we met. So now let's go forward sort of another 10 years. So we're
Okay.
now somewhere in the teens, and somewhere along the line here, you've taken the knowledge that you've acquired, and I would imagine now you've got all this property experience behind you. You've been running the care home, so you've got business experience behind you, and you've got this mastermind where you work with bigger businesses looking at how they scale.
Yeah, so let me just explain how that kind of happened. So over the years, we had a few different businesses. So we had some estate agency businesses which we sold, and other businesses in different sectors. I sort of built my knowledge. I wanted to do different things, so I stopped training in property. We still bought property because it's a thing I love and I think it's a great investment class. But what we also did was, for example, we did a distribution business that we started selling plasterboard and plastic buckets and other things to B&Q, Screwfix, and all of those kind of hardware suppliers, and then also beauty products into Harrods, Selfridges, Boots, ASOS, and all the beauty suppliers that you'd think of. And that was all great, and we ran it.
Sorry,
And
just to tap in there, I can see plasterboard and buckets, right? That's all still in the property thing. What on earth triggered beauty products?
that's my wife. So
Oh, I see.
we were at a show and she was talking about it and she was like, I've had enough of plastering walls. I wanna sell something else. And I was like, okay. And she goes, what should we do? And she goes, I want to do beauty products. So we went and met with Boots and sat down with them and said, look, how can we help and grow your beauty ranges? And then off the back of that, we ended up bringing in a lot of the Korean skincare. So we were the first people to bring in all this Korean skincare into the UK and became exclusive distributors for the largest independent Korean beauty company, Tony Moly, and distributed that into lots of places. And then we sort of had COVID and we had another baby. So she's now 3 or 3.5. And for the year before, we were just like, okay, that's it. We're not gonna do business anymore. So we basically exited out of all of our businesses that we ran. We still had, investments with, for example, the care business and so on, but we're not involved in those in a day-to-day capacity. And we sort of chilled out. And she completely was not interested. I tried to get her to do stuff. She was not interested in working at all. She just wanted to play with the little one. And then I kind of, somebody I knew was doing an app in the beauty industry and said, look, can you help me out? I'm a bit stuck and I don't really know how to grow it. They'd been running it for a couple of years. It wasn't really doing a lot, but it had some traction. So it's called Faces, Faces Consent, this particular app. And so then I got involved. I helped them with the strategy. I raised some money for them, so like 100 grand to get the software working properly, and we launched it, and it was kind of good fun. And then we raised another 500,000, and now over the last sort of 2.5 years, it's gone from we have 130,000 clinics and practitioners using our app, and it does roughly 2.8 million a month in sales, and we've done like 5 million consent forms. So that kind of got me really excited that I can teach and help companies expand really quick. And then we did something with Property Filter, and we
Yes.
started helping Property Filter. So again, I raised some money for Property Filter, sort of 150 grand first, and then another 500,000 from some VCs, and we've grown and expanded that company really quickly.
And just to sort of flag in there, Property Filter, if you remember, I interviewed Graham Black a way back, both on the podcast, but also got an exclusive demonstration of Property Filter with him. So we'll make sure we put the links on the bottom of this as well for you, Hanif, so that people can sort of tap into that.
Yeah, so they've got like an awesome bit of software which allows you to find motivated sellers
Yeah.
of property. So I helped them with that. It kind of married two things I love: data, property. So it just works in terms of interest for me. And then off the back of that, we sort of thought, actually, we really like this, and my wife kind of. The little one's growing up, so she was like a bit more interested. So then other people were asking us to help. So we just created like a mastermind group called Brand Scaling. to help businesses grow really, really fast. So all the businesses in the group or in our group are businesses that are doing things in a disruptive way. So they're changing the industry that they're in some way, and they, are scaling fast.
Okay, awesome. But all of this, what I'm hearing out of this, so we started off with that idea of the books and how you learn is quite important. I think learning how to learn is a skill, and everybody will have different preferences. Some like to listen, some like to watch, some like to do. You've got the reading and making notes, which is very practical. Some people really want to get their hands on stuff. That's the way that they learn. So learning how to learn. I've also heard this last couple of sections is in some ways it's who you know. So who you know that you can learn from, who you know that you can connect with. The whole conversation with where Trudy and the care home business came out of the fact that while you were learning, you met someone. So you might have met her anywhere else, but you've met her, and that's triggered a whole business cycle going on there. And from that, other ideas. And then I'm not quite sure how you met Graham, but then meeting people and then that triggering more ideas. And so it's how you learn, who you know, but above all of this, when you talked about how the pandemic came along and then you exited everything, it's always being in a position where you can prioritize your time. You get a little, it sounds like, I don't mean to diminish it in any way because it's huge when you do it, but you get this flurry of interest in a business, and you're enjoying that cycle. And I don't know, is it,
Yep.
can I say
Yep.
boredom? Is it boredom that might change your life
100%.
changes?
100% it is boredom. So I found that I get excited and I want to do something, and I really want to get good at it for about 2 or 3 years. By that point, I sort of think I don't think I know everything, but I think I've learned what I can from it. And then it's like, okay, what shall I do next? Is sort of I start wanting to learn and do something new. And in the past, what that meant was the first business kind of died because it had no attention anymore. No, but what I do now is, or have done, is I build a team around it to
Yeah.
start with, because I know I'm going to get bored in 2, 3 years. So
So
from day
learning
one,
that about yourself has been really
correct,
important.
absolutely. So from day one, I will build a team that's going to be taking things forward, and I'm unimportant in that business other than building the strategy, because so all the day to day, all the normal stuff is built into how the business runs without me, and that's kind of worked really well. And that's why the brand scaling mastermind works so well, because I'm only giving people the strategy and
Yeah.
the advice and the contacts and networking that other people that they need to know
Yeah.
to,
And you don't have to do anything.
basically I don't have to do anything, and that works really well because I'm really shit at running stuff. I'm just very bad at consistently doing the same thing and making sure things are done. So I've always partnered with people along the way, and I found that if you partner with people who have the skills that you don't, you generally
Yes.
do really well.
Yes. And
um,
I think that's a really important personal lesson for each of us to learn. What is it that we're good at and what we're not good at? And then you've got to fill that gap. If that thing that you're not good at, if what you're not good at is cooking, well, then find a partner or hire someone to feed you. But when it's in business, like if you're not good at accounts or you're not good at marketing, you've got to find someone that you can partner with that fills that, because that's actually essential.
I agree. And the biggest problem is you don't pick that person. You pick a person who's like you because you like people that are like you. So, you're good at marketing. You pick somebody else who's good at marketing because you love talking about marketing, and you both talk about marketing, but
That
nobody knows
hasn't
how to
filled any
deliver.
gaps, has it?
Yeah. And nobody knows how to deliver the product. So you're great at getting all these customers, but then nobody follows up, right? So it's actually harder than you'd think to find people who fill the gaps that you don't, because you actively have to look for someone who is different to you. And so for me, for my partners, what I'm looking for in them is honesty, competency, And and in that order. So first of all, the most important thing is they've got to be honest, then they've got to be competent, and everything else is can be worked out, right?
Yeah.
And then the skills they should be different to the skills I should have, and I know now what I'm looking for from people, and it's worked really well. I need people who are doers, implementers, finishers. I'm a great starter, not a great finisher, so I'm looking for partnering with people who are great finishers, and I help to hone the vision, get the products or services that we're creating right, and then launch those businesses. And once they are working,
You
you
want
know,
someone to take over then?
yeah, I want them
Yeah.
to take over, because it's a momentum. Then it just runs by itself, and if you get
Yes.
it right, it will just carry on growing and growing without you having to do that much.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really, really inspiring. I think the only thing I want to almost like, now I've gone through all of this, I feel like the question is, so how did you get to be like this? So some of it is, the nature nurture thing. If we sort of go back to your parents, was your dad some sort of strategic? Did you get any of this from your parents, or is there
Yeah,
just
100%. I mean, my dad was a business guy, and he ran businesses, different businesses over the years. And since I was a kid, I always sort of looked at those businesses, and he would ask me questions about them. And because he'd asked me, questions about, so I remember when I was like probably 5 or 6, we owned a shop, like a little supermarket, and he'd take me with him to the wholesalers to buy the wholesale stuff, and he'd go, okay, what's our margin? And I'll be like, what's a margin? And then he explained to me a margin. So I knew, that you've got to have a 30% margin on a product in the shop, otherwise you shouldn't sell it when I'm like 7 years old, right? And he would just ask me things like that, and talk about things. And even if I was in a petrol station, be like, okay, how does a petrol station make money? And he'd be like, so petrol, actually that's not where it's making most of its money, it's making it from the little shop. And you straight away start seeing things and business models from businesses without really realizing. And then as I was older, I realized just how much I knew from those little conversations that I'd had.
isn't it amazing? It's almost as if we could find people that had amazing, let's call it parental education, because I think what we do so much now, I'm completely wandering off topic, but this is something I'm quite fanatical about in the little box over here, that when I lift the lid off, I'm off. Education, how we're not preparing our young people for the future. And as parents, we sort of abdicate, and society expects us to abdicate responsibility of educating our children to the system, but the system is failing the kids. And it's only when you've got parents that speak to you about stuff. I had, like, my dad he was a businessman in that he had a business, but he wasn't great on the maths. And what he needed, and only got later in life, was someone that filled that for him. So he had a partner that finally came and filled the maths. My dad was a huge creative, and he was a Savile Row tailor. So if he looked at you, he knew exactly what your measurements were without putting a tape measure on you. And he would talk to you and draw you the suit that you wanted upside down so that you could see the suit. But when you turned it round the other way, he'd drawn a perfect suit. And then he would just create these things that were unique to your body. Not when you laid it out, not every arm is the same length, because our own arms are actually different lengths. We'll have one shoulder that's more up, more down. But when he finished constructing underneath this thing, your shoulders would be level, your back would be smooth, the gap to your fingers would be perfect, so you'd look symmetrical. But the thing that he had created was this masterpiece. But didn't teach me about maths. That was the bit that sort of came from my mum, because she would do the bookkeeping. But what he did was he drilled me on how to learn, because
Mhm.
he felt that even a million years ago when I was at school, that we weren't learning the right things. And so he got me these encyclopedias. And I remember on Sunday afternoons, he'd give me a topic, and then the next Sunday afternoon I'd have to be able to answer questions on the topic, and I'd have to look at the books to find the answers for myself, because at school I was learning about Canada and West Africa, I think, for my geography, but I couldn't tell him where Birmingham was. And he was cross with me that I didn't know why didn't I know where my own country was? So then I had to get the map out and learn where certain cities were and things like that. So the things that we could, if only we could bottle them, like bottle the lessons from your dad and the lessons from my dad and the lessons from somebody else's mum or dad or whatever it is, I think we'd make this incredible, exciting curriculum that, you as a 5 and a 7-year-old, I mean, inspiring that curiosity in kids to learn would be so much better than all the, I don't know.
Yeah, I again agree with you. So, we've got 7 kids between us, right?
Oh,
All right. And so they've all sort of, the older ones are all at uni now. And what we find is, first of all, they all learn differently.
mm,
So, some like to learn from books, some like to watch videos, some like to listen. And you've got to teach them in the way that they learn, because then
totally.
it's fun for them. And, I taught them all how to do their 11 plus and GCSEs and so on. So it was really quite interesting for me to see how different they were in terms of their learning styles.
Mm,
And we sent them all to the best private schools that you can locally. And again, yes, it was way back because we also mentored at state schools to sort of try and give back. And the environment in a state school and even in private schools is so it's not great.
yeah,
They don't really teach the kids to be creative. They don't teach them to be. They're teaching them to be robots to go and work in factories, and I
of
think
course they
that's
are.
originally what it was, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we've actually decided for our youngest that we're going to homeschool her, and we'll bring in tutors and so on to get her to be able to do that. But what we found is one of the things that really help kids to understand and learn is traveling.
Yes.
So our 3-year-old has been on 60 plus flights. So we travel a lot and we get them to experience the different places in different ways. And it,
Yes,
it really gives them a different insight into life, I
totally.
think.
No, I absolutely. And that's another commonality. When my dad was Italian, from an early age, my sister and I, we drove across Europe. So we went through all of these countries, and my abiding memory, which made it very difficult to learn French, was that the French were, I don't mean that they're dirty, and again, it's just the toilets were this hole in the ground. So when you drove, we didn't have all the motorways in the early days. We didn't have the M25, and we used to leave at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night and drive down to Dover and get on the ferry to go over. And then my dad would spend 24 hours and drive to Venice, where his sister was, and that's how we would start our holiday. And we needed to get through France as quickly as possible because all of the toilet stations, the petrol stations, they were really geared towards the lorry drivers and boys, and so peeing in a hole, and it just wasn't girl friendly in the slightest. Yeah, so my memory of France was let's get out of there as quickly as possible. And yeah, I mean all the countries and that love of traveling for me, I've been all over Africa. We've been out to Indonesia, to some of the tiny islands, obviously a lot of it through scuba diving, but every country I go to, I learn about the people and the way that they manage their lives. And I think one of the big things that I've taken away, and because I know you go to Dubai a lot, but a lot of the countries I go to are very, very poor, but the people are so happy. They're always smiling. They're always
Yep.
delighted. They're not moaning, but also because they're poorer, they're not always, it's changed over, well, would I say the last 10 years, maybe slightly longer, but in the early days, they didn't have the mobile phones, they didn't have the TVs. And we remember we went to Cuba one time and they don't have street lights. And we were driving sort of through this forest on our way to somewhere or on our way back from somewhere. And in the forest, there were all these squares of lights and these tin huts, because, they didn't have windows and things. They were just made out of tin, almost shacks. They had a fridge and they had a TV, but they didn't necessarily have a light bulb on, and so they couldn't afford, because electricity would be expensive, and they would use the TV to be lighting the rooms at night. So in the forest were all these sort of squares of lights, and all of them watching football. That's all they ever seem to watch is football. And just, it's this joy, isn't it? And I think if we round up and I say to you, what are your 3 things? And then I'll share back my 3 things, and let's see, we might make 5 or we might make 6. Let's see where we go. So three things that you have learned, not specifically about property or specifically about business, but about life, that would help someone listening to create the life that they wanted.
Okay, so first of all, I would say help people and don't think about how it's going to help you. All right. So again, this is accidental. People would come and ask me for things, and I would, help them out, and not really thinking about it in a sense of how is this going to benefit me? Because I
Not
thought,
transactional.
yeah, it's not transactional. And what I've found is over the years that those things where I've least thought it would be transactional have ended up becoming very, very, very beneficial, because that person has come back later. They've developed, they've grown, and they've said, oh, I remember you helped me out on this. I'm doing this thing. Do you want to come in with us? It's really cool. Or I'm doing this. Why don't you do it too? And you're like, oh, that's really interesting. Or just by helping them, it's triggered another question in your mind, which has changed the way you're doing something. So I
Yes.
remember, I was doing lots of different property deals, and I would help people with their deals, and people would say, oh, but why have you done it like that? And I'd be like, actually, why the hell have I done it like that? If I did it like this, I could save myself, 30 grand.
Yeah.
And then it's all of a sudden, well, if I did that on all these different deals that I'm doing, I've suddenly made a load of money. And why? Because I would never have thought of that if that person hadn't asked me that seemingly dumb question. So I
Yeah.
always try and keep the idea that there is no dumb questions.
Yeah.
And anyway, but ultimately, if you help people without that transactional mindset, you'll find it comes back much better. If you have a transactional mindset, you'll have a transaction, and you charge them £100, you got £100, you thought you're going to do this deal, you make that deal, but that's it. It doesn't flourish from there. But if
No.
you help them with the mindset, I don't know, I don't really care, I'm just going to help them, it comes back way, way, way more, is what I
Yeah.
found.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you've done, like, all the times you've ever spoken at events, you've not been paid for them. I mean, hours and hours I've spent speaking at events, and I also spend a lot of time. I like having calls with people, because exactly that reason, in having a complimentary call with someone, their question, I get the interest of being asked a question that I don't know what question I'm going to be asked, and I need to think and solve a problem. So I love that. But you're right, it sets off this little ripple, and sometimes I have an insight there and then on the call, and sometimes I have an insight a bit later, and sometimes I wake up a week later or 2 weeks later and go, oh gosh, when I had that call with so and so, that's made me think about such and such. So there's always a benefit to helping others that doesn't have to be transactional. Sometimes it can be this sheer joy of knowing that you've made someone else's life easier, which is a nice thing to do. Give me another one then.
Okay, another tip I would probably say is always learn, thinking about it. Always be willing to learn without it necessarily having you may not know why you're learning it at that time, but just learn
Yep.
it. I mean, I always remember what Steve Jobs did. He talks about how he went to a calligraphy class when he was at university, having no idea what calligraphy would be like or how he'd ever use it. But then years later, when he was at Apple, the reason we have all the different fonts on computers, because before that it was just blocks, because nobody thought, why should you have fonts, was because he'd gone to that calligraphy class and he was like, oh, we need to have calligraphy writing and we need to have different types of fonts. So that's always really interesting to me. And I've always had the attitude that I'm willing to learn, and that doesn't mean I will pay. I mean, I will pay for courses and I will pay for stuff, and pay for books and whatever, but I will do stuff for people in return for learning. So, one of the first things I did when I was learning about property is I spoke to some local surveyors and I started driving them around. So, they had to do 5 surveys that day. I'd pick them up, I'd drive them from one house to the next house to the next house and walk around the houses with them. And that gave me an insight into how surveyors work, what they look for. They started telling me about all the different things that I should do when I look at a house. So I got a huge wealth of knowledge from those surveyors just by driving them around. Okay. They liked it because they had someone to talk to, because it's quite a lonely job, driving around all day on your own, and plus they didn't have to drive, so it was great for them. So 100% keep learning and always learn new stuff.
Yeah, awesome. I totally agree with you there. And then I think you've probably done this one already, which was, no, I'll let you say. Let's see if you say the same as I say. Go on then, and your next one.
So the third, I mean, there's probably, and they're kind of related, which is your network and your partners, right? And for me, is finding people who can fulfill the skills that you don't have. That's the third thing that you really need to have, because if you want to be successful and have a great life, you need to only be doing the things that you enjoy.
Yeah.
And what I've realized really early on is I don't like doing certain things. It doesn't matter how much you're going to pay me, I just won't be able to do it for any sustained period of time.
Yeah.
So if I want to be successful and have fun, then I need to work with people who fill in those skill gaps. So if I'm great at strategy, they need to be great at distribution or at delivery or whatever it is. The stuff that I don't like doing and don't want to do, I need to find partners who are good at that. And that's what I've been lucky enough to do over the years. And it's given me the freedom and the ability to do lots of different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thought you would come up with those. And then so I think for you is how you learnt, who you know, which is the partner one at the end. And I had in one that you didn't sort of mention in that way, but I suppose it comes with the idea of the partner, but it's how you spend your time, being clear on what gives you pleasure in your personal life, and therefore how you want to create your business life around it so that you can get yourself to the position where you can turn things off, turn things on, shift, bring in partners to backfill. And obviously you've been doing this for some 20, maybe not all the full 27 years because there was a bit of a gap at the beginning, but 20 plus years. Yeah, you have been it, although you're saying that you like the strategy and then you change your mind, you've actually been very focused all the way through. Even though the pattern looks like you've stopped and started, the focus for me has always been those core bits at the front, making a difference, learning along the way, how you spend your time and who you surround yourself with.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's so true. And every time we decide to do something, my wife and I will sit down together and we'll say, okay, what do we want to do? So, for example, we love traveling. So, okay, if we're going to travel, and that's something we enjoy, and we've got the kids, so we've got to have them. And then it's like, okay, what business can we do that allows us to do that? So I remember sort of 8 years ago, we decided, okay, what should we do new? And we said, let's do a distribution business. And the reason we did this distribution business I talked about was because we would travel around the world finding different brands and different products. And we built that business specifically to allow us to do that. So the way we structured it was all we had to do was go and find new products, whether it was in Korea or the US or Brazil or wherever. And the systems on the back end were
drop it in.
Correct, without us having to be there. So I really agree with what you're saying, and it's important. But a lot of people lose sight of that, and they think that first of all they have to do everything, and then secondly they think, oh, I like this person, and they end up working with people who are the same as them with the same skill set,
but all the gaps.
Exactly, and you're both great at marketing, but nobody's good at delivery or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you need to look for people who have those skill sets that you don't have. And for me, I choose my partners based on their honesty first, then their competency. That means they can actually do something, and then the skills that I miss, do they have? And it's
Yeah.
that real order of three that I go with.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Hanif, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. I love having a conversation with you. I love listening to you. So this has been a real joy for me, and I hope very, very informative for everybody listening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and it was great chatting to you as always.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully I'll see you again soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Take care.
Goodness me, I am so grateful to that 1 hour with Hanif. He has been an inspiration to me throughout my property journey. And again, here we are speaking. We haven't spoken for a couple of years, but to have that opportunity to have 1 hour in depth with him has been phenomenal. And you'll have heard at the end of the podcast that I wrapped up on the key learnings there for him. But I think the bits that came out of it is when you do business, are you creating a business that enables you to live the life of your choosing, a wealthy life? Who you do business with will either make a difference positively or negatively for you. And then how you learn and who you learn from. I think if I go up and up and up, that's what it is for me. Choosing a business that fulfills you, that creates the life that you want to live. Do it with people that add value to your business and add value to your life and fill in the gaps and support you. And then, of course, understanding how you learn. And we talk so much about, a few seconds on Facebook and Instagram does not explain exactly how to invest in property. So really be aware of who you follow. And I hope that you'll choose to follow me on Facebook, and particularly here on Instagram. When we get to it, have a look at Instagram, where I share all the reels. I share snippets of each of these podcasts that I have recorded. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to go back through my reels and pick snippets that will then maybe guide you to different podcasts that you want to have a listen to, and introduce you to the many guests that I've had join me over the last couple of months. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that you have got some real whoosh out of this episode. Please leave a review. Make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss out on any other episodes. And of course, go over and join a Wealthy Life, the Wealthy Life community. You'll see the notes and links in the show notes, where you'll be able to hear another exclusive interview with the incredible Hanif Khan. Take care, and I'll speak to you next week.